This is what a meth lab looks like. Sometimes it may look like a chemist's laboratory in a high school or a college. 9 times out of 10, though, a meth lab is just going to look like a bunch of garbage laying around on your property. Empty coffee filter boxes, empty boxes of Sudafed pills, maybe starter fluid cans with holes poked in one end of them, maybe 2-liter bottles or some kind of Pepsi or Coke product bottle with the rubber hose sticking out the top, or a gas jug with the hose sticking out the top. If you walk up on something that you think is a meth lab, whatever you do, don't touch nothing. Definitely don't open the lids on these fruit jars. If that metal part is rusted up and you try twisting the top, sometimes that rust can cause a static charge that will set a little spark off that will cause the ether inside the jar to blow up in your face. That's usually what that is in the jar, is ether. Also, never open the valve on a propane tank if you find one sitting around somewhere it shouldn't be sitting, like in a ditch or somewhere. This is a very dangerous time of the year for meth, because most of the places across the country with spring hitting, we had the farming starting to go on, and these guys are stealing the anhydrous ammonia, this fertilizer farmers use. They can put it in any kind of jug they want to, but they usually put it in these propane tanks. If they've been putting it in there very long, it's going to turn this copper piece here a bluish looking green. Anhydrous ammonia is a fertilizer that will attack your respiratory system, can kill you. If you spill it on yourself, it sucks the moisture out of your body. It's very cold. They call it anhydrous burn, but actually it's very cold and it will deteriorate the flesh. I've got a picture I used to show high school students of a guy that spilled anhydrous on himself. He stole a drinking thermos full of it. He got in his pickup truck. The drinking thermos turned over. Anhydrous ran all over his right butt cheek. This is the weirdest looking picture you ever seen in your life. Of course, his butt had healed up, but it was a jail picture. They had him with his pants down to his knees. He had one left butt cheek. His right butt cheek, it was just gone. It wasn't there, like a gator bit him in the butt or something. But my wife told me that picture was too gross to take it off the program. And I really didn't think any picture was too gross for my program. But seeing she's the boss, I had to take it off the program. I like to call this section of my program the Angels in Black. For so many children in our country, every day angels come dressed in black. And they definitely are the kids' angels. Without these guys going in these toxic environments, putting their lives on the line, more of these little kids will be dying every day in our country. I not only think that the police are angels to the babies, they're also angels to the meth cooks themselves. Just last night in Kentucky, I talked at a graduation program that they got going over in Kentucky called the Drug Court. And it's where they had sent some meth offenders. They went through a 1.5-year long program and been sober for a long time. And it's a pretty extensive program. They're really keeping the watch on them. But that's what I told that group last night, that they had angels that they never even dreamed of before. Because I know the meth cooks, when they get busted, they don't look at the police as angels. When I went to prison, I didn't look at the police as angels. But looking back, I realized by me going to prison, it saved my life. At least it prolonged my life, because I was about to die. I was using drugs so heavy. And I love people so much nowadays. I don't want to see nobody go to prison. It can be a tough place, but I'd rather see a person in prison where I know that they're going to be fed 3 times a day. They have a chance of at least prolonging their life or even saving life, than being on the street using meth, because there's only one end of this drug, and that's death. They're going to die sooner than God intended for them to, unless they stop using. That's why I say that. When the police come into a meth lab, they're going to be dressed in these biohazard suits. They dress like that for a reason. There's the bottles I talked about, the rubber hoses sticking out the top. They dress like that because they learned the hard way that these chemicals cause cancer and they can cause damage to your body that will last the rest of your life, so please be careful. Never go in a meth lab. The meth cooks nowadays booby trap their meth labs with every kind of booby trap you can think of. And these guys don't care if they kill an 8-year-old kid or 80-year-old granddad. The reason I say that is because if they cared, they wouldn't set up no death trap like that. They told us back home, told my sheriff when they caught them doing it, setting up shotgun traps and things like that they did it because they was paranoid. Other meth cooks was trying to steal their chemicals, like their $2.50 can of starter fluid, or their anhydrous ammonia. Is that not the stupidest thing you ever heard of? Kill somebody over a $2.50 can of starter fluid? But that's what I mean. These guys aren't thinking straight, so please be careful. I started getting high at the age of 13 years old with my dad. That's me shooting a basketball. I didn't see my dad from the time I was 5 till I was about 12. But when I started visiting him in the summers, I started getting high with him. I don't blame my dad for nothing that's happened to me. It wasn't right for him to turn me on the drugs, but I had God give us all a free will. I could have chose not to use those drugs, but I chose to put them in my system. So I take full responsibility for my actions. I try to encourage young people, no matter how you've been mistreated or what kind of cards life has dealt you, at some point you've got to stand up and take responsibility for your own actions. We can't go through life blaming all the bad things we do on them circumstances. I try to do that. I had opportunities to go to college and play basketball on scholarships, but by the time I was a senior in high school, this picture, I was smoking dope every day, drinking alcohol on the weekends, and had been turned on to cocaine. Once I got hooked on cocaine, I no longer cared about going to college playing ball. All I really cared about was where I was going to get that next bag of dope at. I got out of high school, married my high school sweetheart. The marriage didn't last very long because she was a good Christian girl and she had married a drug addict and alcoholic, and I was a mean and abusive man to her. So when the marriage failed, I moved to Dallas, Texas. Right when I didn't think anything in my life could get any worse, I moved into a crank house in Dallas. I'd never heard of crank before. But when they offered it to me and told me it was a speed form, I tried it, and the first time I tried it, I knew that was my drug of choice. Our statistics tell us that 90-something% of people that try this drug end up getting hooked. Some people don't believe the number's really that high. I believe the number's definitely that high for people who was like me, who already have issues with other drugs. It does seem like they become hooked the first time, or at least they know that's going to be their drug of choice. Every one of my friends who I've seen try meth, every one of them in Tennessee got hooked on it. Now some of them are dead, some of them are in prison. In the beginning, the meth made me feel strong and full of energy. I thought I was thinking clearer than I never thought before, but I would only do it on the weekends. I watched other people in the crank house stay up for a week at a time. They talked about hallucinating. They acted weird. And I remember thinking back then at 21 years old, I thought, man, I'm never going to let this dope control me like these old guys let it control them. But nobody controls this drug. I don't care who it is using. It always controls the user. I left Texas and come back to Tennessee a year and a half later. It was a few years down the road, I met my second wife, Amy, and got her pregnant. Instead of taking care of her and the baby like a man ought to do, I was a dope dealer for 23 years. I was on drugs. And for 20, I grew and sold marijuana. It was harvest time. I had 25 pounds of pot. I told her I was going to take it to Tulsa, Oklahoma to sell it, make me some fast, easy money. I'd be back in a couple of months. That's what I used to would have told you, all of your kids. They could make fast, easy money selling dope for me. But the truth is, there's no fast, easy money selling drugs. I don't personally know anybody who's ever gotten rich from selling dope. And I know a lot of dope dealers, but most of them were just like me. We sold drugs just to support our own drug habits. And I don't care if they offer me all the money in the world to sell a kid drugs nowadays, just one joint, all the money in the world. There's no way I would do it. I know I'd be selling that kid death and destruction, but I didn't think about it like that back then. I made it to Oklahoma. I went out there 3 weeks before the police raided the house, sent me to McAllister, Oklahoma State Prison. Instead of being 2 months when I got home, it was almost 2 years later. This is a picture of me when I got out of prison. That's my daughter sitting in my lap. She had been born and she was just about to turn 2. I married her mother, and it's about a year later when meth hit Tennessee in the mid-90s there, about 94, in my area real heavy. I got back to using. I no longer just do it a couple of days. I started staying up 4 or 5 days, and I started hallucinating. I got to seeing some of the same stuff them guys in Texas talked about seeing years earlier. One of the weirdest things to me about this drug is a meth user can be in California or Canada or Tennessee. We hallucinate a lot of the same things. I got to see what we call shadow people. One of the most common things for meth users start out seeing. In the beginning, I would see movement out the corner of my eye. I would turn and look, it'd be nothing there. But as my addiction got worse, I could be in front of this many people. And if I was strung out, I could watch shadows walking around the room, seeing all kinds of other weird stuff. My wife started trying to get me to quit, not because I was seeing things, but because I was becoming more mean and aggressive toward her and other people in the community. But I started thinking, instead of me quitting, I need to get her using with me. I thought if I get her to use with me, she'll quit nagging me about wanting me to quit all the time. Plus, most of us men know if we get young women hooked on drugs like cocaine or methamphetamine, we can use and abuse those girls, and they'll take that abuse. For one thing, they're not thinking straight, and plus they'll have a dependency on us for the drug. I started telling my wife she ought to try it. It wasn't as bad as everybody said. It'd only make her feel good. She talked about wanting to lose weight. I said, meth will help you lose weight, and it will. For most people, it's an appetite suppressant. But what it'll do is actually starve you to death. And you know, it sounds cold-blooded, me saying that I would give my wife something that would kill her, because it is cold-blooded. But I didn't care about my wife at the time. I didn't care about myself. Like I said from the beginning, what was king of my life was a drug. And if you tell somebody enough times it's not going to hurt, it's only going to make them feel good, especially somebody that loves you, most people are going to try it. My wife tried it, and the first time she tried it, she believed she was hooked on it. That's when my kids started suffering the most. That's who always suffers the most is the children. Before, they always had their mama to take care of them when I was locked up in the back room doing dope deals, using drugs for 2 or 3 days at a time, but now I got their mama locked up back there with me. But I would have told you a few years ago I thought I was a pretty good dad. I justified it in my mind by thinking, well, I don't do the drugs in front of my kids. That's how I thought I was being a pretty good parent. I'd have told you I got a dope room in the back of my house like most other parents I know do. If my kids need me, all they got to do is come back here and knock on that door, and I'm there for them. But the truth is, I never was there for them. My kids were severely neglected. If you ask my oldest daughter what she remembers about the years of me and her mother using drugs, what she'll tell you is that it seemed like that we fought every day. And that's how my house was. It seemed like almost every day at the end of the addiction, it was just screaming and hollering, and it was hell on earth for children. I come home one day strung out, been up for about 4 days, got in a fight with my wife Amy and slapped her in the face like I'd done so many other times when I would lose my temper on this drug. But this time, I reached her in the bed and grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun, put it to her forehead and pulled the trigger, threatening to kill her. I dry fired the gun at her. This time, Amy called the police. She normally didn't call the police when we had fights. I had always told her to keep our business in our family. I'd tell her something like the police don't care nothing about helping you anyways, and how ridiculous it is. If somebody's hurting you or somebody you love, by all means call the police. I guarantee they'll be able to help you. Thank God this time she did. They come over, took my guns away from me, took me to jail for marijuana. I'm not supposed to have any guns, you know, being a convicted felon. Wasn't very long until I got out of jail and come home, and by that point, I started becoming suicidal. Suicide is so common with meth users that before the day's over, there'll be more than one person across the United States that has tried to commit suicide today or been successful at it because of the depression and anxiety brought on by this drug. I was in a half a dozen high schools just last year where teenagers, half a dozen of them, where teenagers had committed suicide the year before. The last school was a police chief of the town's daughter took his own gun and did it because of depression and anxiety from meth. I'd gotten out of jail. My wife and kids were staying with their grandparents. And I had been seeing things so long, it no longer freaked me out when I would see stuff. Most of the time I knew I was hallucinating, but I never got used to the noises and the voices that come along with meth. For me, it started like I could hear people whispering, but it sounded like they was too far off. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Then it sounded like noises in my house of people walking around and stuff. That day's the first day I remember hearing a man's voice. And hearing these voices are pretty common for a lot of real heavy users. I had a young man, 24 years old, called me last year from a Wilmer, Minnesota jail, want me to come visit him. His aunt had seen me talking the night before. I didn't know him, but they call me like that quite often. And if I have a chance, I'll go visit him. I'd worked at that police office about 3 different times. They let me visit the young man. When I got in there talking to him, he was crying uncontrollable. He said he'd been strung out on meth, and him and his wife had split up, and he was living in his uncle's basement. He said, I heard a man's voice tell me that my wife had been cheating on me a number of different times. He said, I got up and went over to her house and kicked the front door in, and he hurt the lady so bad physically, he almost killed her. That young man sitting in state prison right now in Minnesota. His wife wasn't cheating on him. That's just what the drug told him. That voice told me that day, said, your wife and kids would be better off if he was dead. And it would sound like an audible voice, something I had never experienced. And then that voice said, the world would be a better place without a guy like you. And what that voice said to me next wouldn't have been a thing in the world to me if I'd have been told about Jesus through my grandfather, who was a preacher, and my mother my entire life. But that old dragon always knows our breaking point. Everybody has different breaking points. He said, you really think Jesus is going to forgive you for the things you've done and the people that you've hurt? And I remember like it was yesterday saying out loud, I said, no, I don't think he will. I've done some terrible things in my life, and I've hurt a lot of people physically and emotionally, not only in my own family, but across this country. I am a born-again Christian now. I didn't come here this afternoon to push my beliefs on you. I'm only here sharing my story with you. I respect other people's beliefs. I only hope that you respect mine. I got up out of my chair, went to my barn, and tied a rope up in my barn, going to hang myself. About that time, my sister pulled up to check on me. I thought if I'm going to do this, I got to get her out of here. I sent her to town to get me some stuff. Before her car got going down the road good, I had that rope around my neck and was stepping off my old riding lawnmower. It just started choking me and hurting. I tried to grab the rafters and I couldn't reach them. I tried to get my foot back up on that mower, but it was too late to change my mind. In a matter of seconds, I was unconscious. When I woke up, my sister had found me. The rope had burnt and cut me from ear to ear. It took me about a week to get to where I could swallow again. But I was still alive. The rope was broken too. I tell people, I guess when my body went into a convulsion and started jerking when I went unconscious, that my body weight snapped that old rope I used. But I know the Lord saved my life that day. I didn't take advantage of that situation like I should have. They sent me to a preacher instead of a rehab center. We didn't know any rehab centers back then for meth. But what I try to encourage people, even if it's not specialized in meth, still you need to go to a support group. I got off of dope for about 5 months. A preacher helped me. But when I went back to work, I thought I could hang around my old buddies I had been using with. That showed my ignorance about addiction. 5 months with no time to put myself back in that situation. I thought I could handle it. That's where I needed that support group. In a matter of just a few weeks, I was back to using. When I got back to using, I just give up. I thought, what's the use of trying to quit? I'll never get away from this drug. And each time I went back to using, it got worse and worse. That was another huge mistake I made, was giving up. It doesn't matter if a person tries to quit an addiction 1,000 times and they fail. As long as you keep trying, eventually one day you're going to be able to quit. Never give up like I did. I started staying up 8, 9, 10 days. My routine was to eat a couple of sandwiches in a 7-day period, about as much as I would eat. I went from 200 plus pounds to 160. I no longer felt strong. I couldn't think clear. This is a picture of me just a couple months before I shot myself when I'd been up for 4 or 5 days. It's not a prison picture, even though it says Tennessee across the top. It's actually where I was having my license renewed because I was running drugs from Oklahoma to Tennessee that day. And you know, I didn't want to go to Oklahoma and pick up that dope with not having no license. I had to be, legal. I'm going to tell you some of the things that we do, man, we're on this stuff. I can stand back now and laugh about it, but just really, it's crazy. My wife tells me it doesn't like the same guy. When this picture was taken, when I got out of prison, I wasn't using meth. I'm happy, I'm healthy. To this picture here, just a couple months, like I said before, I shot myself. Meth is such an evil drug. What I believe that it does, like most addictions, is that it robs people of the ability to be able to feel love and compassion for other human beings. That's why we see parents that will beat their kids to death, like we've seen in Tennessee, burn them with cigarettes, cut their heads off, drown them in bathtubs, because they have lost the ability to even feel emotions for their own children. It isn't that they don't love them deep down in their heart. I believe that they do. I always love my kids deep down in my heart. I just couldn't show it. This drug wouldn't let that love come through like it's supposed to. One thing I think all meth addicts also share in common is paranoia. The longer a person's on this drug, the more severe the paranoia is going to become. I started telling my wife she needed to buy me some guns. I said, all the other drug dealers I run around with have got guns. And I said, they're going to break in our house and steal the dope I've been bragging about having, kill me and you, the kids, to get it. That scared Amy enough that she bought me 2 guns. I picked out an SKS assault rifle and a .22 automatic. She wished many times she had bought me them guns. I ended up threatening her with them. I put over 200 bullet holes in my home where I went completely insane on this drug. Would think I'd hear people walking upstairs and think it was the other drug dealers. I'd go through my house blowing holes in my ceiling, screaming and hollering, cussing I was going to kill them. I'd get upstairs, there'd be nobody there. My wife and kids would be telling me, Daddy, we didn't hear nobody. But I was so convinced somebody was up there. I started accusing my wife of being with the other drug dealers. I accused her of everything you can imagine. She said she couldn't take that lifestyle no longer. She quit using drugs, started going to church, gave her life over to God, started praying for me to be able to quit. But by this point, I couldn't seem to quit, and I had become suicidal most all the time. I thought the only way out for me was death. The worst mistake I ever made in my life was thinking killing myself was going to make my wife or kids better off, or anybody better off. Killing yourself is never the answer to a problem. I don't care how bad a situation is a person's in, as long as they're still breathing, things can always get better. You never know what's around the corner for you. I couldn't see it like that back then. I come home at 9:30 in the morning, 21st of February, 2003. My wife and kids was moving to their grandparents. I was begging her to stay. And at the end of my addiction, I had become physically sick. I had a form of Parkinson's disease set in where my arms shook all the time, and I got sick that morning. I asked Amy to lay down and talk about it. She agreed to, but as soon as she laid down with me, she said, I'm going to lay here and talk to you for a minute. She said, but me and the kids are still going to leave. When she said that, something in me snapped. I reached over her, grabbed my SKS rifle, laid on my stomach, and pushed the barrel up under my chin. And I thought, man, that's it. I'm going to blow my head off. This dope has robbed me of everything. She screamed and reached over to grab the barrel up under my chin. Before she could grab it, I pulled the trigger. The bullet went in me right here, come out between my eyes, breaking every bone in my face except my left eye socket, blowing my nose off, all my front teeth out. It blew teeth and bone into my wife's right arm. They dug out later, but And the doctor said he thought that's what saved my life, was somehow the bullet blast blow most of the bone and the teeth fragments and things out away from me, instead of blowing them back in toward me where it would have blinded me or sent them through my brain and killed me. These pictures I'm going to show you are from the Sheriff's Department in Tennessee. I told my sheriff what I want to do with them. He let me have them. We've taken them all over the country and halfway around the world. We hope in another year or so we will have them all around the world. They're pretty gross pictures. I didn't put them on here to gross nobody out. I put them on here to try to show young people the reality of what drug addiction will cause somebody to do to themselves and to their families. And I know a lot of young people think it won't happen to me. I never thought nothing like this would happen to me either. I actually remember, and I don't tell this at every program, but when I was 17 years old in high school, they brought 3 convicts in my high school doing programs, trying to tell us kids how selling drugs had ruined their lives. They was in prison. I'll never forget sitting in the top of the bleachers, mad because my principal made me go in there next to my girlfriend, high on marijuana. I looked over at my girlfriend and I told her, I said, man, what a bunch of losers. I said, what do I got to come in here and listen to this crap today for? I said, I'll never end up like them losers. That's what I told her. You can imagine how I thought about them then, 10 years later, shackled on a prison bus going to state prison, thinking, man, I wish I had listened to them guys. And it makes my heart weigh heavy, thinking that young people think that about me. And I know some of them probably do think that they'll never end up like me. I pray to God that they don't, but I know they're playing Russian roulette with their life if they're fooling around with these drugs. We can't pick out which one's going to be a drug addict, which one's going to be an alcoholic, get in the car and kill somebody or commit suicide. There's no possible way we can do that. So they're definitely playing Russian roulette with their lives. I have had a couple of people pass out looking at these pictures. If you don't like the sight of blood, you should look at them. You do feel yourself getting dizzy or faint, you'll get up and go get a drink of water and some fresh air. I've seen some smaller, I don't know how young these guys are, bring all my kids through the program with me. My kids go from 4 to 15, but that's up to each parent. And if you guys don't want your kids to see these pictures because they are very graphic, now would be the time to have them look away. So as a gun blast went off, you would think that it would knock me unconscious, breaking all the bones in my face, but it didn't. Meth is such a strong stimulant that it kept me awake during all of it. I remember hearing the gun blast. I felt my face blow apart. I fell off onto the floor, grabbed my face on both sides, trying to hold it together. My wife went to screaming. Some of my kids ran back here to the bedroom. They would stand over the top of me. I could hear them screaming. I told my wife I was sorry. I said, don't let the kids see me. And what I meant was, don't let them see my face, because, of course, they could see me laying there. But my wife kept trying to pull my hands away to see how bad it was, because it happened so fast. She didn't know how bad I was hurt, but I never would let her. I thought the whole front of my face had actually blown off. But the kids knew I was hurt real bad. They could see all the blood I was laying in. She ran and got the telephone call of 911. My wife did. About the time she got on the phone with the dispatchers, my mother ran into the room. My kids had called my mother earlier that morning, who lived right up the road from us back then. We since had moved. But I'll never forget my mom getting there right after I pulled the trigger, standing over the top of me, screaming, crying, yelling, why did you do that? I told my mom I was sorry, I didn't know, and that was the truth. If you had asked me moments earlier, I could have told you a couple of reasons, but when that pain hit me and sobered me up a little, I remember laying on the floor thinking, man, why did you do that? Nothing is that bad. I had a beautiful wife, 6 wonderful kids, a good job. I actually had everything a man could ask for, but I was miserable from years of drug addiction. You just started out smoking a joint, drinking a beer. I never dreamed I would grow up and be a drug addict and alcoholic. They wanted to airlift me from my house in Nashville, Tennessee to a trauma center, but the helicopter pilot was picking somebody else up. The other pilot couldn't fly in bad weather. They decided to take me to a local hospital. The sheriff's department had wrote me off for being dead. They said they didn't think there was no way I could make it. My family's holding out hope. They got me to that little local hospital. The doctors told my wife and family, they said, we got to get into Nashville to a trauma center, or we're afraid he's going to die. We're not equipped for this kind of injury. When they told my wife that, she was just so much shocked that day. She said, what do you mean he's going to die? She said he was just talking to us at home. She didn't even realize I was hurt that bad. She don't remember seeing any blood. She was just covered in it. They told her and the police there was no way I talked to anybody. They said the tip of my tongue was blown off, the rest of my tongue was split too, and the roof of my mouth was disintegrated, as you can see in this picture. How can you talk without them parts? But I did. I talked to the police, the paramedics, my wife, my mother. Only way I could explain that in my own mind was I believe God gave me the ability that day to tell those 2 women I was sorry, because when I woke up 3 days later in Nashville, it took me 2 months to learn how to start speaking again, and about a year before you could understand most everything that I say. I show this picture just to show you I really wasn't weak, even though my eyes was closed. You can see here how I'm squeezing my right forearm with my left hand because I was in so much pain. I didn't actually go unconscious until the ambulance ride. They decided to take me 2.5 hours in the ambulance. They didn't think I could make that trip. They told my family the best thing they could do was go home and start praying. It didn't look good. So they took my wife home, gathered around there praying. My cousin said they was actually waiting on a phone call that I had passed away. They didn't want to take Amy to Nashville to get the news. She was in so much shock. And when they didn't get that phone call in a couple of hours, then they started in the Nashville behind us. And my wife took these pictures about 13 hours later. If they closed my face up the first time, I was so lucky God put that one paramedic that he put in my life that day. He'd worked in Memphis for years. He'd seen a lot of gunshot victims. And his colleagues said he was one of the best paramedics we had in our county, and thank goodness he was working. He saved my life twice. The first time when my throat swelled up, he ran an oxygen tube down my throat, got me some air. The second time was in the ambulance when my heart stopped beating and I was dying. He ran a main line into one of the arteries of my heart, started pumping some kind of adrenaline chemicals into my heart, giving me different types of CPR, got my heart going and brought me back. I essentially got to meet the guy and thank him for saving my life. I don't remember that for 3 days. I woke up 3 days later. I can't see hardly nothing out of my right eye anymore because of the gunshot wound. But that day I couldn't see out of my good eye because of swelling of blood past the foot of the bed. I didn't recognize a woman walking up to me until she was right in my face. It was my wife. She was smiling, telling me that she loved me. And she was telling me she found out over that 3 days in the waiting room that she was pregnant with our 7th baby. That's what I meant earlier when I said you never know what's around the corner for you. I didn't know my wife was pregnant the day I shot myself. She didn't either. I don't think really that it would have made any difference, but I know if I'd have died, I wouldn't have got to meet my last son. I told my wife I wanted to name the boy Gabriel after the messenger angel because I knew he was a gift from God to me like all my kids have been. And I really personally believe that's what all kids are. They're gifts from God. That's up to us how we want to treat them and treat that gift, that is. I'm going to tell you about tweeting. I'm going to be done. Tweet's a term used by law enforcement and meth addicts. Just a nickname we give somebody when they're really high. We say they're tweaking or they're spun out. Lots of different nicknames. But that's when they're in their most dangerous stage. They may be seeing things or hearing stuff. And it doesn't take no 3 days for them to get there. A heavy user can be tweaking within a few hours of if they take enough dope. Don't go around them by yourself if you can help it. Keep a 7 to 10 foot distance away from them. Police are told not to shine a bright light in their eyes when they pull them over at night. They think they're tweaking because their pupils stay big and dilated, won't adjust the light properly, and that shock of that bright light might make them run or become violent. Slow your speech, lower the pitch of your voice. They're already hearing noise at a louder, faster pace. That's where a lot of child abuse comes in, I believe. The kids are crying, they need somebody to love on them, but the user can't deal with that stress and that noise. They end up doing something terrible to the kids and try to make them be quiet instead of loving on them. Slow your movement, especially if you're getting in an argument with them, those fast arm moves and they misinterpret as an aggressive move. Once again, keep your hands visible. Don't stick them in your purse or your back pocket, especially if you're arguing with them, because these guys are so paranoid. Most of the older ones, the heavy users, are packing knives and guns out of fear and paranoia. This drug brings on. If you make them feel threatened, they won't hesitate to hurt you. And you may think, well, that's my friend or my family member. They would never hurt me. But listen, 90% of the time, the alcoholic and drug addict ends up hurting and killing the people closest to them. They're not the same when they're all doped up as when they're not. I love the way that they said it on that tweet tape out of California. They had a doctor or a counselor on there. He said what makes a meth addict extremely dangerous, and I agree 100% with this. He said to the outside world, it appears they become aggressive for no apparent reason. He said, but in that user's mind, they may feel like their life is on the line and feel like there's a real threat when there really is no threat. And that is the truth. That's what makes it so dangerous. Also, keep that tweaker talking until you get away from them. A lot of times when they become quiet, they may start having some weird paranoid thoughts about you in that stage. So if it is a friend or family member that you do want to confront, don't confront them by yourself. I don't suggest confront them until they come down, but if you can't wait, a lot of times you can't, don't do it by yourself. Keep them talking until you get away, get another friend or family member to come back with you and confront them. The main thing is to be extremely careful because they can go from smiling to a rage in a blink of an eye. That's a picture of my wife and set of kids. Of course, it's my daughter Sarah, David, and Josiah, and Rachel, and Rebecca, and Abigail, my son Gabriel, and my daughter Sarah's dog Blaze, which really has adopted me. He sleeps with me every night, sheds on my bed instead of hers. Maybe he doesn't like me. Maybe that's why he does it. He just acts like he does. I don't know. Together we can make a difference in this fight. It takes all of us working together. If you have a friend or a family member who is struggling with addiction, let them know how much you care about them. Encourage them to go get help and treatment. The addicts are the most self-pity people in the world. They think, man, nobody loves me, nobody believes in me. I don't know why alcohol and drugs do that to us, but it does. That's why I say, let them know how much you care about them, love them. But it takes all of us working together.